Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for being part of this WorkSafe webinar today. It is great to have you with us. The topic of this discussion you're about to hear is unsafe is always unacceptable for our young workers. It is part of the 2021 Health and Safety Month. My name is Cameron Ling and I'll be your host today, and it is great to have you with us. Our program of sessions are virtual, but we still have the same aims of Health and Safety Month that we do every single year, and that is to keep you up to date. The theme for this year is you learn something new every day. We've structured this session as a brief overview of WorkSafe insights, then a conversation between myself and the panel that outlines what makes our young workers particularly vulnerable to physical and mental workplace injury. We hope to outline this morning how you can learn more about your rights and responsibilities and what support services are available. As I mentioned, our session today involves myself and three expert speakers. Time to welcome them in. Brian Chamberlain, Construction Industry Education Officer, Inspector for WorkSafe Victoria. Welcome, Brian.
Morning, Lingy. Good to see you again, mate.
Yeah, great to see you again. Thank you for joining us today. Also joining us is Bella Himmelreich, Outreach Organiser, Young Workers Centre with the Victorian Trades Hall Council. Good morning, Bella.
Good morning, Cameron. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. I'm rapt that you could join us for this conversation. Also joining us is Nicole Sinisic, Senior Inspector, Psychosocial, WorkSafe Victoria. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, Cameron. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. Before we get to our panel, I'd just like to start with a brief introduction. WorkSafe Victoria is a government agency that aims to keep all workplaces healthy and safe, and to provide high-quality care and treatment when workers are injured. It's important to remember that employees are supported in a range of ways by WorkSafe Victoria and other organisations. And also, don't forget that employers have a legal responsibility to help look after the physical and mental safety of their staff while they are at work. For a range of reasons, young workers have a unique risk profile. In a number of industries, young workers are overrepresented in injury statistics compared to older and more experienced workers. That's why it's so important that young workers are aware of what's going on around them and speak up about unsafe work environments if they are concerned. Let's start by playing a short video from the recent WorkSafe campaign, Unsafe is Always Unacceptable.
You know we're recording today?
Yes.
Okay. And we're going to talk about hospitality.
Nice.
You know that there's free food and free drinks. There's a lot about it.
Yeah.
It's best to not complain about safety. It's best to just focus on getting the job done.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. How do you go with working crazy hours? So if you had to work sort of midday to midnight, maybe a little bit later.
Oof, yeah.
When it gets busy in hospitality, customers can scream a little bit at you.
Oh, yeah.
So you'd be able to deal with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Confrontation, yeah.
Would you be interested in a job like this?
I think so.
Yeah.
Really powerful stuff that there and the message behind it. I'd like to now turn to our panellists. Brian, you are an industry education officer at WorkSafe Victoria, providing information and support and promoting OHS outcomes in our construction sector. You've also taught building and construction at Swinburne TAFE. Brian, can I start by asking you, what is the WorkSafe Victoria perspective on young workers and why is it so important to keep them safe?
Yeah, thanks, Lingy. It's a really good question, and I guess it's part of the reason we're here today. Obviously, Health and Safety Month, and one of the key focus is to stress the importance of workplace safety, to make sure that workers of all ages are safe and get the right sort of controls for workplace hazards and risks at work. For young workers, though, I guess they're such an important group. I mean, they are the future of our workforce. They're our kids. I mean, I have teenage boys now growing up. So any kids aged or workers aged between the 15 and 24 make up that group as we classify as young workers. And unfortunately too, they make up a high percentage of workplace injuries. They make up about 16% of the workforce, but every year the injury numbers in that age group between 15 and 24 is increasing. And I guess some of the things that we see are a range of reasons, and getting out amongst those kids and talking to them and things like that. There's a vast array of things like poor inductions, lack of role clarity, maybe not enough supervision, not enough training, to name a few. So it's important that they understand the basics and understand what their rights are. Also, too, that they need to know that they also have responsibilities. They have a duty of care to protect themselves and others when they're at work. They also need to cooperate with their employers' efforts to make the workplace safe, including following policy and procedures, using PPE when it's provided, and then reporting hazards and risks when they come up at work as well. So it's vitally important that we get that out there to them.
So, Brian, what is the role of WorkSafe Victoria in protecting these young workers?
Yeah, again, Lingy, I guess WorkSafe Victoria, our job is to assist Victorian employers and employees to achieve healthy and safe working environments for all workers, all workplaces in Victoria. We also obviously regulate, so we're ensuring that people follow occupational health and safety laws, making sure that employers are doing the right things. Also, too, I guess work cover or that part of WorkSafe, which is paying compensation for lost wages, medical care and treatment for workers when or if they are injured. And it's important too that young workers, I guess, know that WorkSafe are here to support them and try to prevent injuries from ever happening in the first place. And I think, that prevention is vital. For me, working with a lot of apprentices, I guess, in construction, and it's probably the same with a lot of injuries, a lot of other industries, I should say, is they see WorkSafe as that bad cop sometimes, that they don't actually understand that we're there to try to help them. We're not there to stop people working. We're there to make sure that they get home and people have a safe workplace so that, there's less impact on their lives in the long run and things like that. So we offer that range of supports while young people are at work, and obviously in the unfortunate circumstances that they are injured.
Thanks for that, Brian. It's a great overview of what WorkSafe does. To dive a little deeper into the issues affecting young Victorian workers, let's introduce our other panellists. I've mentioned joining us from the Young Workers Centre is outreach organiser Bella Himmelreich. Bella, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your great work?
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Cameron. I'm a young worker myself. I'm one of 4 outreach organisers at the Young Workers Centre. My work background for the past kind of decade has been mostly hospitality, so working in cafes, restaurants, bars, and also some gardening work as well. And their industry is pretty dominated by young workers. And I know that for myself and a lot of my co-workers, safety risks were just seen as pretty normal, things you had to work around, things that it was your responsibility to make sure that you didn't get injured. And there wasn't really a clear understanding of it being the employer's responsibility. So I'm really excited to now be working at the Young Workers Centre, which is basically a free and confidential legal service for all young workers under the age of 30 in Victoria, where we basically educate and empower young workers to know their rights at work, to take action and to help them resolve safety and industrial issues at work. And currently we have a focus similar to Brian on apprentices, because we know that's a category of young workers who are sustaining the most injuries, facing the most bullying and harassment at work. And so we're trying to help them in the workplace. And obviously also if they've left and they've sustained an injury, helping them then as well.
Great, thanks for that, Bella. Also joining us, as I mentioned, is Nicole Sinisic, a Senior Inspector Psychosocial at WorkSafe Victoria. What about you, Nicole?
Oh, thanks, Cameron. Look, I've been with WorkSafe for 19 years, and during that time I started off in the OHS Inspectorate and then worked over in WorkSafe's Return to Work Inspectorate as well. I joined the Psychosocial Inspectorate in 2016, and I'm really passionate about being part of a team that specialises in reducing psychological harm and injury in the workplace. I've been involved in helping and supporting a lot of young workers when they raise complaints about being exposed to inappropriate behaviours at their workplace, such as bullying, gendered violence, such as sexual harassment and occupational violence.
Thanks for that, Nicole. Bella, I just wonder if I could jump back to you for a second. What are the most common Victorian industries where young people can be put at risk, and why do you think this is?
Yeah, totally. So like I was saying, those kind of small sites like hospitality, like retail are really common. We've also got healthcare as a really big one that has some of the highest injury rates in Victoria. And then construction and manufacturing as the big ones where you're getting young workers as apprentices and also as labourers. And there's obviously a lot of different reasons why that's the case, but some of the key ones I think to highlight is the high rate of casualisation, that most of these young workers aren't securely employed, they don't feel empowered to speak up, they don't know that their job will be safe and they'll be offered shifts the next week if they do speak up. There's also overrepresentation of young workers, like we were saying, migrant workers and international students who, again, have less recourse to speak up. And also there are a lot of small sites with less oversight, less regulation and less union presence. And so you don't have a workforce that is empowered, that is powerful and that is large. Instead, you're often having young workers having to speak one-on-one to employers and trying to raise issues when they know that actually it might result in them losing their job.
Thanks for that, Bella. Nicole, all workplaces are different, but what are some of the factors that can lead to young workers being particularly vulnerable in these industries and others?
Well, Cameron, there's a number of factors that can lead to young workers feeling vulnerable in the workplace. And these are things like that young workers are less likely to receive OHS training and supervision. They're less likely to be aware of their rights and responsibilities as well. And like Bella had mentioned earlier, they're often not supported to speak up about OHS matters. So they feel that they can't ask questions. And at times they can feel silly or stupid for asking the same questions again and again. And also what's been mentioned earlier is they're more likely to be employed in high-risk industries, and it's often their first working experience also. Our statistics show that younger workers in their first month of employment are 4 to 6 times more likely to experience a work-related injury or illness than those that have been there for a year or more. Younger workers are also more likely to be employed in insecure work, such as casual part-time work, labour hire, unpaid internships, freelance or even gig work. And that ends up leading to a lot of underreporting of incidents and industries that occur, injuries that occur to workers in this age group.
That's interesting what you've run through there, and quite understandable. I suppose, Brian, as a result, could you tell us about the most common physical injuries they may face?
Yeah, no problems, Ling. I think all those things come into the equation, but the examples and probably the most common injuries will be musculoskeletal disorders, sprains and strains, obviously, when they're new to a job. Falls is obviously a huge concern, and not only just for construction, but also a lot of other injuries. I mean, we have a hell of a lot of falls from low heights, could be even in retail off small step ladders and things like that. Trips and slips, hitting heads, those sort of things. Working with faulty equipment. All those type of things, being left alone on site can also, cause these type of things to happen as well. Manual handling injuries, as I said, being new to the job, not being taught proper techniques is probably a key one. I know in construction, about 33% of injuries are hands and fingers, which, those kids or young workers need those hands to be able to do their jobs pretty much in all jobs. So damaging the hands and fingers can cause a lot of problems. Serious lacerations, even amputations. I've had, spoken to young apprentices as young as 16, 17 that have had fingers amputated and things like that in certain industries and certain parts of jobs. So that becomes a big problem for us. And again, it comes back, I guess, to that lack of training sometimes and that supervision and someone there. And as Nicole said, to be able to speak up, and I think Bella's mentioned that as well, just that confidence. But obviously the worst case, young workers still are represented in fatalities as well, and serious injuries from falls, working with electricity and things like that, where it just seems to be that they're put in those situations and we still see them happening a lot. So, a lot of what we see is that lack of training, supervision, and I think too, it was touched on before about sometimes just that, temporary employment can be the part as well. A lot of times these days they don't give these workers that direction enough and treat them properly, I guess, to train them properly. I mean, we're there, they take on young workers just to get them going and to as a cheap way of making an income, and rather than train them properly, we just sort of put them in a position where those things can happen.
Thanks for that, Brian. It's hard to hear that is still happening and still a constant battle to protect the young workers. Yet, Bella, it's not just physical safety, is it? How about the mental health angle? Mental health hazards might be hidden, but are still very, very valid. What are some of the mental health risks to not speaking up?
Yeah, it's a great point, Cameron, and a great question. We're seeing kind of astronomical rates of young workers having really adverse mental health impacts from their workplace. And it's mostly down to knowing that they're going to walk on site into that workplace and they're going to be spoken down to, they're going to be belittled, they're going to be bullied, they're going to be harassed. And like Brian was saying, that bullying and kind of goading can result in really serious long-term physical injuries as well. And there's just kind of no consequences for the employers or the managers on site who are often perpetrating that bullying as well. So we see particularly apprentices, but young workers across the board getting really serious anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress from the workplace. And they can kind of name what has contributed to it in terms of the harassment, 12-hour shifts as well, just the kind of stress of being at work for a long time, not knowing how long you need to be there for the rest of the day. And it can take a really long time to recover. It's hard to access compensation and definitely hard to just keep going into those workplaces and keep feeling the mental strain happening over and over again.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Bella. Nicole, jump over to you for a second. In your work, in your experience, what are some of the warning signs of an unsafe workplace for young people?
Well, Cameron, there's a whole heap of warning signs we'd like young workers to look out for. The first one being a lack of training and supervision. So, for example, if your boss is asking you to complete tasks that you don't actually know how to do and they're not showing you how to do those tasks properly and safely, then that would be a warning sign. And also other warning signs are like bullying behaviour. So, say, for example, if there's another employee or a manager, or even if the business owner is calling your names repeatedly or yelling at you or swearing at you, then that would be a warning sign as well. Being pressured into working double shifts or being asked to open up the morning after you've worked a late shift the night before, that can lead to fatigue. And that's another warning sign as well. Also being asked to do lots of driving between workplaces, say going from one site to another, that can cause fatigue as well, especially in young workers, as they're often only new to driving and they're on their P plates. So it can be quite tiring for them and can lead to issues of fatigue. Violence and aggression, say, for example, if an employee threatens to assault you or actually physically assaults or throws things at you or punches, kicks you, then that's clearly a warning sign, and we would want young workers to report that to WorkSafe as well as the Victoria Police. Gendered violence and sexual harassment. For example, if an employee is making inappropriate comments based on appearances or pressuring you to go out on dates or sending you inappropriate text messages and so forth, that's another warning sign as well as power imbalances. So in that example, I'm meaning if there's a senior manager that's making inappropriate comments to junior workers or young workers, then those matters should be reported also.
Yeah, very important, Nicole. Thank you for sharing those warning signs. Brian, you're an ex-carpenter yourself and work with a lot of apprentices. Getting an apprenticeship and hanging on to it can be difficult in current times. My final question to you is there a risk of burnout for young people in the construction sector?
Yeah, good one, Lingy. And look, there is, I think, as you said, being an ex-tradie myself and teaching apprentices and sort of going through that period and sort of also going back into TAFEs now and working with them. I mean, it's funny, the conversation, even Nicole's answer to the last question around the driving and the fatigue and things like that when we talk about burnout. I mean, I see ads on Facebook for, first-year apprentice carpenters must have a licence and must be able to work alone unsupervised to do certain tasks. Now, these are things where we're just putting these kids out there and we're putting them at risk. Obviously, puts pressure on them. It forces them to do things sometimes that they aren't capable of doing. The long hours stuff, I mean, it's a no-brainer in construction this time of year. Like, you look at the weather we've been having with that rain, and now and obviously too, even a bit of lockdown as well. Coming out for the next couple of months, the weather starts finding up. All those bosses are going to want to get out there and make as much, make up for as much lost time as possible. Christmas, it's always, let's get this done before the weather turns to crap. So those longer hours that they're working, they need to work quickly. Sometimes they're not up to it. The industry's cutthroat as well. So the quicker we get the job done, the more money we get paid. So there's always that pressure to finish the job. Apprentices obviously always feel like they need to impress their employers as well. And I guess the other side of that is too, why would, from an apprentice point of view, why would the employer ask you to do something that, if you're not capable of doing it? So they get that pressure to be able to say, yep, no worries, I can do that. And then the expectations are there that they know and they're able to carry out the task. And I think, we talk about, again, that temporary employment, doing certain things in trades. I think sometimes we have an obligation to actually teach these, apprentices and employees to be successful, rather than just teaching them to do certain tasks that are going to make us money as employers. Probably the other thing too, I see as well in especially in construction, some of the employers are becoming younger as well. So it's nothing for a young, we're talking about young workers between the ages of 15, 24. It's not uncommon to find an employer that's in that age bracket as well. So, again, it's trying to teach them how to work with employees and that as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, Brian. And thanks to all of you for the great overview and such important messages. I'd like to ask you each in turn, what can young people, or, well, anyone for that matter, do if they witness dangerous behaviour or are concerned about safety in the workplace? Nicole, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. Look, in the first instance, I would encourage the young worker to talk to someone. Can be your parent, older sibling, a teacher, careers counsellor, or even the health and safety representative on site if you do have one. You can also report issues to the apprenticeship board or the VRQA, or to the coordinator who has assisted in setting up the apprenticeship. And you can also contact WorkSafe's advisory service directly. We've got a lot of competent, capable advisors that can give you the information you need and point you in the right direction and give you really good advice.
And Nicole, could I just stay with you for just a second there? Where could our young workers look for this information?
They can find this information firstly on WorkSafe's website. So we've got a website as well as a advisory call centre that they can call directly and speak to someone. But there's other great resources as well, like there's Headspace, Kids Helpline, Lifeline and Beyond Blue. They have phone services as well as internet sites that young workers can access and get a range of information from there. I'd also encourage young workers to talk to their GP if they're starting to suffer from anxiety or stress. And there is a lot of information out there, so I would really encourage you to do whatever you're most comfortable with.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Moving to you, Bella, what would your advice be around these helpful resources?
Yeah, totally. Well, the first thing is, if you're a young worker in Victoria, you can come and chat to us. So jump on youngworkers.org.au and all of our advice is free, it's confidential, and it's a really great place to start. And we can obviously refer you to other legal centres if they're more appropriate. But also the main thing that we always recommend to young workers is to also join your union. No matter what industry you're in, there are thousands of workers in this state fighting for safety, fighting for better pay and to keep you safe at work. And it's good to have people in your corner and to have strength in numbers. And so by joining a union, it means you're not alone when you're speaking up at work, and you're protected by other people on your work site and in your industry as well. But we can also help you, navigate that. And we also give free advice to all young workers as well.
That's great. So there's a lot of support out there. Some young workers, though, might be anxious speaking up to their boss or worried about what will happen if they make a report to WorkSafe. In summary, what would you say to them, Brian?
Yeah, in summary, it's a good question. The first thing I think is just don't be afraid to speak up. I mean, that's probably the key thing. And one of the key things I say to a lot of business owners, apprentices, even teachers at TAFE who will ask me certain questions about what's happening is if WorkSafe don't know what's going on, we can't do anything about it. And that's probably the key thing. And I guess it's the same with when they're at work. If people don't know, then they can't do something about it. So they need to make a report, elaborate on how to report, on what's happening as well. What I also try and talk to people when I'm out speaking with, might be apprenticeship support officers or some of the trade teachers or even parents. It's about how sometimes they make the report too, to make sure that, we do know what's happening. We can sort of follow it up if that makes sense as well. There are certain ways they can make a report, and that's, again, like as Nicole said, ring our advisory line and talk to our advisors, and they can talk through what's happening and explain what can be done, what can't be done. Obviously, if there's a HSR or a rep or a mentor or a parent colleague that they can talk to that they're comfortable with, or a manager or a leader, make sure they go and raise the concerns with them in the first instance, wherever possible. I think the worst thing is just to say nothing. They can't feel silly about it either. They just need to be able to go through those processes. And I think long-term, the need to make that report out, as we've spoken about, the repercussions and the ongoing issues that can happen if they don't speak up, they really need to look at those, and we need to make them aware of them so that they really do get it in their head that they can speak up. And one of the other things I say to some of the apprentices is if you're working for someone you feel unsafe, then maybe what you need to do is start looking for another job. You can still work, but look for another job while you're still working. Don't feel as though you're trapped in that situation. There's always something that you can do, someone you can speak to. So it is very important.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And thank you to all of you for your insights there. I'd love to get to the questions now because there are a heap coming in from our audience. I will attempt to get to as many as I possibly can. There are a lot coming through. So if I miss any, I do apologise in advance. I'm happy for anyone to jump in at any time. If you've got something to add to someone else, please do so. I'll start with this one because there's a number of our audience who want the answer to this one. I'm a young worker and my health and safety rep doesn't really speak to me and my workmates. What can be done to get them to help me? Brian, perhaps I start with you with that one.
Yeah, no worries, Lingy. I think it's probably one of those things where you as a young worker, you probably need to reach out a bit, probably try and speak and break down that barrier. I know that can be difficult. Obviously, confidence can be pretty hard at times for young workers when they're on site. They're obviously worrying about what they're doing more so than sort of speaking up and that sort of thing. But I think in that instance, like obviously a health and safety rep on a site should be there for that person and make sure that they get around them and understand how they go. But by the same token, sometimes as you find with kids is they need to come out of their shell a little bit and join the workforce and speak up at times as well. So I would be trying to ask questions where you can talk, ask about maybe the job, certain things around it just to bring up that and raise those conversations, try and help.
Bella, Nicole, have you got anything to add to that one?
No, not really. I would just encourage the young worker to speak with try and engage firstly with the HSR, or there may be another trusted employee that they can speak to if they're finding they're not getting the support they need from their HSR.
Great, thanks, Nicole.
Yeah.
Bella, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add that, yeah, that's a great point. If there's a delegate on site you can speak to who maybe has a better relationship with the HSR, it's a great place to start. And also we have had experiences of businesses choosing kind of a member of management to be a health and safety representative, which obviously isn't super fair. So actually figuring out what the process is to get a different person elected as an HSR, get more health and safety reps can be a better way to go around that as well.
Yeah, good point you make there, Bella. Can I stick with you on this next question? And a few people are keen to find out the answer to this particular question. I had a friend who was injured at work at a fast food joint and her boss told her to not put through a compo claim as it won't be approved. What can she do?
That's really disappointing. I'm sorry to hear about that, but yeah, pretty common. it would be great if we could expect the employer to follow through the process after injuries, but often we can't. So the best thing to do is if you do sustain an injury at work, straight away write down the details. So write down the time and date that it happened, what happened, when you were working and what you did. Let your supervisor know, but then go and seek medical advice and make sure you get that certificate, go to your GP, because even if the management haven't filled out their side of the incident diary, if you've got those records, you've got the best chance at getting a compensation claim. And obviously the Young Workers Centre or other legal services can actually help try and, make the management be cooperative in getting that claim through as well.
I'm going to steer this one to you, I think, Nicole, but again, please, anyone jump in who feels like they can answer it as well. Can my boss give me the sack for speaking up about health and safety? Am I protected?
Yes, you are protected. You can't be sacked for raising OHS issues with your boss. There's protections under the OHS Act. And look, obviously it's disappointing if that is something that the boss has threatened. If the workers continuing to raise issues, they will stop their employment. But yeah, there are protections for workers, and if that worker did find themselves sacked as a result of raising OHS issues, I'd really encourage them to contact our advisory service where our inspectorate can become involved.
Yeah, can I just add to that, Lenny? That's one of those common conversations I guess I'll have with a lot of apprentices and young workers at times, especially in construction. And I guess one of the key things is that's where they need to notify WorkSafe, ring our advisory line. Often what we find too is a parent might ring our advisory line and, say their son or daughter's been asked to do these certain things over a certain period of time. And then when you ask, okay, where are they working or something like that, they go, oh, no, they've quit the job and they've gone. So it's very hard to follow up on. We need to know about these type of things at the time. So it's very important that they do ring up our advisory line so that we can follow it up and do something about it. Probably the other thing for that is, like I touched on before, that, that's where I guess sometimes I like to try to encourage young workers. They've got to speak up, but also too, there's ways to speak up. It could be questioning how something's done rather than saying, I don't want to do that or refusing to do something. And then if it comes to the crunch, obviously, then they've got to look at their own health and safety and say, well, do I really want to work for this person?
Well, Brian, staying with you, because I think this next question from our audience flows on to what you're talking about there. How does it work? What happens when an issue is reported?
Obviously, with an issue being reported, it would depend on how it's reported and what the issue is. So obviously from a inspector point of view, we would get what we call a service request, which might be, someone's working on a roof. For instance, some young kids working on a roof. So we get that as a service request. The inspector goes around to that workplace and then we'll obviously get those people down off the roof, talk to them about what they're doing up there, what sort of controls should be in place. And a lot of times too, it's about, okay, why have you got a young worker up there? And obviously one of the key things for us is, that young worker being put at risk is a serious issue for us these days. And that could be, put up for a referral or further investigation and possibly a prosecution.
Thank you for that, Brian. The next question, a lot of the questions coming through are on this similar theme. I'm going to go to you, Bella, on this one. And I understand the perspective of the young workers here probably asking this question. Sometimes I'm asked to do things that don't feel quite right, but it's not easy to talk to my boss. What should I do?
That is such a great question. I know that, I've had that experience, and pretty much all the people we talk to have that experience of when there is something that's a bit unsafe, their boss is in a different room or they're not communicating or they say, I've told you how to do it once or whatever. So I think, like Brian was saying, it's kind of about making that call. That is there a way that you can learn how to do it safely in terms of asking, a qualified person on site, asking an apprentice who's been there a bit longer, saying like, hey, I haven't quite learnt that yet. Is there a way that I can learn it before I do it? But again, if it's a pattern of them continually asking you things that aren't quite right, that's a really big red flag. It's a really big warning sign. And we've had young workers who have felt intuitively that something's wrong, have left, and just weeks later, there's been a massive safety incident at their work. So don't ignore that instinct, listen to that intuition. And if it's happening repeatedly and there's not a way to change your boss's behaviour to make it safer, then it also might be time to leave.
Great. Thank you, Bella. If that person speaks up, I think it then leads into this next question, which I'll direct to you, Nicole. How is a whistleblower protected by WorkSafe when alerting to unsafe practices or cultures at a small to medium business with respect to standing up for the youth?
Well, when you contact WorkSafe's advisory service, depending on the nature of the complaint being raised, you can be an anonymous caller. So say, for example, if you're working up on a roof and you haven't got the proper equipment to work there safely and you're reporting that, then you can call and remain anonymous, and that will then be assigned to an inspector to go out and go to the workplace and have that conversation with the employer to talk to them about, look, we've had an anonymous call, you're doing some work on the roof, how are you doing this, what safety systems have you got in place, etc. The only complaints that can't be, that we don't take anonymously are ones that are to do with inappropriate behaviours, and that's because we deal with specific allegations that the complainant has raised. So those behaviour type matters can't be anonymous, but if it's physical hazards and other, physical hazards within a workplace, they can be reported anonymously and have an inspector out there to deal with those.
Can I just add to that, Lingy? And it's a classic example of what we would get. And I remember doing a open day at one of the TAFEs a while ago, and I had a young, he was a second-year apprentice plumber. He was about 22 years old, and we'd talk about all the things that we've been speaking about there. People, being sent out alone, unsupervised, driving, all those type of things. And he came up to me and he said, "Look, what can I do about my boss continually sending me up on a roof without any fall protection?" I said, "Well, what do you do?" And he explained to me what he did, and I said, "Well, what do you want to do about it?" And he said, "I'm sick of it." But he said, how do I stop it? And I actually said to him, I said, take this card, which had our advisory number on it. And I said, next time you go into a job and you know you're driving towards that job and you know there's going to be no fall protection ever, pull over, ring the 1-800 number and say you've just seen a kid on a roof at this address working with no fall protection. And he goes, what will that do? I said, hopefully by the time you get to work and you're up on your roof and a WorkSafe inspector will come around, get you down off the roof, the first thing he's going to say is, who do you work for? All right, I say that's anonymous. You don't have to tell us who you are. But all of a sudden now your boss is now explaining to us why he sent you out on your own to work on a roof with no fall protection. And he walked away, he came back, walked past me, shook my hand, said, thanks, mate, and off he went. So it's just empowering him.
It's a great example, Brian. Thank you for sharing that one with us, because I think with a couple of the other questions that a lot of people are wanting answered right now, I think that's a good example for it there. What avenues for support do young workers have? What can WorkSafe actually do to help? That's one example you've given right there.
And probably the other key to that is too, I often say to apprentices, if you're working one-on-one with a boss and you ring up anonymously and make a complaint and we turn up on site and we say, oh, your apprentice rang us, the boss is generally going to look sideways and go, what? So it's important too that if they can remain anonymous, but also too if they want to remain anonymous but leave a number, leave a name, leave a contact number and request for an inspector to call them. I don't know if I get that from my point of view, I'd be ringing the apprentice at some stage on my way to the job to try and find out some background on what's happening. So when I do get there, I'm not going to throw him under the bus.
That's a great point, Brian. Nicole, I'll steer this one in your direction. What is the most common issue WorkSafe is hearing from young workers, and why do you think this is?
Well, because I work in a specialised team to do with psychosocial hazards, the issues we get most informed about is bullying behaviours. So it could be an employee bullying an apprentice or a manager bullying a young worker. And when I talk about bullying, I'm meaning, verbal abuse, threats, yelling, those repeated behaviours that are impacting on the young worker and their well-being. So when we get complaints like that, we interview them firstly to get further information around, tell us more, tell us what's actually happening there. And then we raise those concerns with the employer.
Well, and I think this next question is directly related to what you're talking about, Nicole. I'll pose it to Bella, but please jump in if you've got anything else to add. What can a retail employee do if they're being verbally abused by a customer and not getting any support from fellow employees?
That's, a really good question. The first thing is that safety, it's always the boss's responsibility, or the most high in charge person on site that day. It's not ever your responsibility, even if the abuse is coming from a customer or a coworker rather than your manager. So no matter where it's coming from, the responsibility lands with the manager. A couple of things on that is, firstly, we always say that your coworkers are your best allies in the workplace. So if you have a coworker that you trust, a coworker maybe on the same level as you, that's the first place we look for support. And just ask them, hey, this customer keeps yelling at me. I'm going to go out and work in the back for a bit, or I'm going to go take my break. Can you cover for me? But if they're feeling really isolated in the workplace and they don't have any employees or coworkers having their back, that can be really tricky. The two things I would suggest is, firstly, just trying to get yourself out of the situation again. So saying to the supervisor or the manager, hey, I'm going to go do this thing in a different room. Or, hey, I'm going to take my 10-minute break, and just trying to get yourself out of the situation. But also, if you are in that kind of really hostile environment where there isn't support from a manager or support from your co-workers, I'd suggest thinking about joining a union as well, or speaking to the Young Workers Centre to try and get yourself in a place where more broadly you're looking at the culture issue at your work, where there's bullying from kind of all sides, and you're looking at strategies to try and deal with that.
Great, thanks for that, Bella. This one, either to Brian or Nicole, I'm happy for either of you to jump in. If you are injured at work, are your medical bills paid by the employer?
Well, yes and no. Basically, what the worker would have to do if they're injured at work, they would need to fill in a claim form and lodge a claim for compensation. Most good employers would pay the initial expenses, and under the claim system, there's a portion that they have to pay anyway before it would become an accepted claim. But I don't know those figures or anything. But yes, workers can lodge a claim if they are injured at work, and they can submit the certificate of capacity and the claim form to their employer, who then send it on to their agent for processing. Brian,
anything to add to that one?
I think Nicole had that one covered for me. Right. Probably that little bit of return to work helps too, doesn't it, Nicole?
Well, I'll put this one to you then, Brian. Is WorkSafe engaging with schools? My son is ignorant of his responsibilities under S22. He's working for a labour hire company, which is sending him to various sites, and I'm pretty sure no induction's being done.
Yeah, good question. We do actually engage with schools. I know my role as a construction industry education officer, I obviously do a lot of work through the TAFEs and things like that, a lot of presentations through different trade TAFEs and things like that, a lot of VCAL vet students as well, so year 11, 12s, even down to year 10, through TAFEs doing certain vet courses could be construction related courses. Also done quite a few actual schools as well when they call up and request a WorkSafe inspector to come out. So I've done a few of those as well. So going in and talking to, sometimes it might be year 10 groups before they go to work experience. It could be year 11, 12 groups. I've even done a few special needs schools as well. So some groups there where they've had special needs kids and things like that to sort of talk about them going to work as well. So it is something that we do. It's one of those things where it can be very hard sometimes for kids to comprehend, because when we start talking about rights and responsibilities, there are all those things that sometimes kids just, unfortunately, it goes over their heads until they actually start getting into those situations where we can point things out. Then they start to learn what it is. So, and obviously too, if he's the other one with the inductions, if he's moving around different sites and not going to be there for a long time, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes these employers don't want to spend that much time on the safety and the inductions because they need to get the work done, unfortunately. But we are definitely out there trying to do as much as possible.
Great. Thank you, Brian. I'm wary of time a little bit, so maybe I'll just a couple of quick ones here that hopefully we can get a little bit of information out to our audience. First of all, could you please advise what the website is for young workers?
Yeah, it's www.youngworkers.org.au.
Excellent. Thank you, Bella. Do the WorkSafe laws change depending on the industry you're working in?
No, the OH&S Act covers all industries. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. And just one final one. What is the average call-out time?
Depends on the type of call. So if it's an immediate risk, it could be a 2-hour response time up to 2 hours, or generally if it is an immediate risk, if something has happened, then we as an inspector will get a call from a manager who's in that area and say, look, I need you to get to this job. So it could be there depending on how far away we are. Or if it's a non-immediate risk, then we have, might be a few days to get to that. So it just depends how it's reported and what's reported at the time as far as the call outs go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who sent questions in. I apologise to anyone's questions I didn't get to there. I'm conscious of time a little bit, but really appreciate the fact that so many people are engaging in this conversation. As part of wrapping it up, I suppose I want to ask a final thought from you all. What can young people look out for? Any brief final message for our viewers? Brian?
For me, one of the key things I tend to leave the guys I speak to with, or people I speak to with, is keep it simple. I think Bella touched on it before. If it doesn't look right or feel safe, more than likely it's not going to be safe. Just stop and ask. Just take that couple of seconds. I mean, the majority of the time we go out, you're looking at an incident, why didn't someone just tell him that the ladder was not properly positioned or something along those lines? So just, keep it simple is probably the key from me.
Great. Thanks, Brian. And you, Bella, what would your takeout be for our audience today?
Yeah, I guess what we often say to young workers is a job is just a job at the end of the day. It's not worth your safety or your life. And if you are being asked to work unsafely by your boss, there is action you can take and there's people to help you get there. And it's a really brave and it's an important thing to speak up, and it helps a lot of people beyond just yourself. So yeah, get in touch with us or WorkSafe because there is kind of support for you to do it, and it's a really important thing to do.
Great. And Nicole, what one thing would you like our audience to remember?
I'd like them to remember that they can call WorkSafe's advisory service for any information to do with safety at their workplace, or to actually raise complaints around inappropriate behaviours or unsafe workplaces.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our audience who sent those questions in, as I mentioned before, but big thanks to our speakers as well. Brian, really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Cameron. No worries, mate.
And Bella, thank you to you. Keep up the great work that you're doing.
Thanks, Cameron.
And finally, Nicole, really appreciate you joining us for this chat.
No, thanks, Cameron.
We hope that you as the audience have found this a really lively and informative session. Please remember, if there is something urgent that you need to discuss, there is the WorkSafe advisory line and emergency line available to you. So please utilise that. And we're going to note on the screen shortly a list of all the contacts that we've talked about today, and note that we have some helpful resources for the multicultural community for non-English speakers that are available on the WorkSafe website. They're on your screen now, www.worksafe.vic.gov.au/choose your language, and also worksafe.vic.gov.au/coronavirus-COVID-19-information your language. So please utilise those. If you do have any further requests for information, please get in touch with us. Thank you for tuning in today. We really appreciate you taking the time and engaging with us. All the best, and most importantly, please stay safe, young workers.